If you're thinking about doing a NEBOSH course but want to find out a little bit about what's involved, specifically with the open book exam, what the questions are like, that type of thing, hopefully this video might prove to be valuable. This will give you the opportunity to have a look at a typical NEBOSH open book exam question and have a go at answering it, and then find out how you would have scored. Shortly, you'll be presented with a scenario. After that, you'll be prompted to stop the video and have a go at answering the question based on the scenario, and I'll actually go through the question before the scenario plays as well. So you'll be prompted to stop the video, have a go at answering the question, and then come back to the video, play it from the point that you left off, and then be able to critique your answer. Before the scenario starts, I'll just go through the question. The question's going to be based on health and safety management systems. Effective health and safety management requires good leadership. Comment on the current health and safety leadership in the scientific research organisation. So obviously the scenario that you're about to see is based on a scientific research organisation. There's a note to say that you should support your answer where applicable using relevant information from the scenario. So the scenario will be gone through now. We'll also we'll put it in the description. I'll put a link to the transcript of the scenario as well, because in a real exam you don't get a YouTube video to watch for the scenario. It's provided as text that you have to read. As I said, following the scenario you'll be reminded of the question, prompted to pause the video so that you can then write out your answer, and then you'll be taken through the things that you should have put in your answer in order to gain points. So now here comes the scenario. A scientific research organisation employs 150 people. Most of them are scientists or technicians. The remainder of the staff work in finance, human resources, marketing and communications functions. Most of the senior leadership team and line managers are scientists. The Chief Executive Officer set the organisation up about 10 years ago and quickly recruited 5 former scientist colleagues as directors. Together they form the senior leadership team. Worker numbers have grown from around 40 to the current 150. The existing building is not large enough to accommodate this increase in workers, so it's advantageous that many can work from home doing desk-based research. However, some workers still come to site as required. Initially, the work carried out was largely desk-based research, and approximately 40 scientists were employed. A biology laboratory was introduced a few years ago, and the desk-based research continues alongside this. The innovative science being pioneered by the organisation has recently attracted significant investment. This has enabled the acquisition of a large single-storey warehouse on an industrial park. The intention is to refurbish the building for use as a number of laboratories and offices. The activities planned at this new site will greatly enhance the capacity and capability of the organisation. The biology function of the organisation will be expanding, and chemistry laboratories will be added, which will include some continuous automated processes. Outside, car parking spaces will be converted to house a chemical store and the goods in area for deliveries. The organisation has limited experience in managing general health and safety risks and those specific risks involved with laboratory facilities and the refurbishment of the newly purchased warehouse. You are relatively new to the organisation, and your role is split between managing the existing laboratory and advising on health and safety. You are currently studying the NEBOSH Diploma for Occupational Health and Safety Management Professionals. You have experience of working in much larger research organisations alongside qualified health and safety practitioners. You have introduced a laboratory safety manual. It covers general safety equipment, standard safety practices, drills, waste management, key risks from laboratory work, physical, chemical and biological hazards. You use some of this in an induction for new starters. The directors and managers are more concerned with getting on with research, and health and safety is considered a necessary inconvenience. You've tried to get the leadership team to take the lead on specific risk assessments for some of the practical experiments, but they do not see it as their responsibility and think that it's your job. You have explained that you're not familiar with some of the unique materials that the scientific research organisation are using and need the leadership team's input. The scientists rely heavily on their scientific knowledge to guide their practice. Some of the newer scientist recruits have spent more time doing practical experiments in their previous roles and have shown interest in working with you. No general health and safety awareness training is provided. You ask HR what health and safety training management have been given. HR respond that training records are down to individuals to keep, but HR doubt that they have had any training. As the work has been largely desk-based, in the office or at home, health and safety has not been considered an issue. A friend of the CEO is a director of an organisation experienced in refurbishing and fitting out buildings for educational and laboratory use. The CEO is impressed by their friend's apparent knowledge of all the issues, including those associated with health and safety that need to be addressed. The friend has mentioned that their organisation has recently gained an accredited health and safety management system. This has helped reduce costs, including insurance premiums. To gain this accredited system, the friend's organisation had undergone an extensive assessment of their policies, procedures and risk assessments. The CEO recommends to the board that their friend's organisation is appointed to carry out the building's refurbishment. The CEO believes that this will take care of many issues where there is a lack of experience in the CEO's own organisation. The CEO's recommendations are accepted. The board are keen to get the new facility operational. This will give the opportunity to showcase the organisation's innovation and attract further investment. You find out what you can about this contractor. They do not appear to have had any enforcement action taken against them. You also note from their website that they're a member of a contractor health and safety scheme. You contact the scheme provider to confirm this. The website also indicates their health and safety performance is better than the sector average. You are asked to be part of the project team for the development of the new facility. There is an expectation that you will be the laboratory manager at the new facility with responsibility for health and safety. You recognise that to do this role effectively, you need to be competent. You discuss with the Director of Laboratories that you need to complete your studying as soon as possible. Initially, they're reluctant for you to take time out to study. They're concerned that this will distract you from your day job. You put together a case as to why this is necessary, and the Director eventually agrees to support you. The project team meets weekly in a temporary building at the new site. You are involved in providing information on hazards and risks associated with the new processes. A new upper floor is being installed, which has been left with an unprotected edge with a vertical drop. A pile of materials has been put by this edge and a temporary barrier has been placed in front of the materials to warn of the danger of the unprotected edge. The contractor workforce, consisting of a supervisor and 3 workers, arrives on site and reports to the site office. The work is to be carried out under a permit to work. The supervisor, trained in the responsibilities of accepting and working under a PTW, provides a description of the work to be done to the permit issuer. The 2 of them have a brief discussion about the work, including the nature of the job and its associated hazards and risks. Control measures for working at height are also discussed. The permit issuer does not go to check on the upper floor before issuing the permit and is being called away by the project manager. The multi-copy form is quickly completed for the work to start immediately. A copy is left in the site office. The supervisor retains one and the permit issuer says that they will put the permit on the display board. The contractor workers are on the upper floor assessing the job and need some clarification. The supervisor has gone for a break and has taken the copy of the permit with them. The contractor workers are keen to get on with the job. After waiting around, they decide to carry on. While lifting some wooden boards near the unprotected edge, one of the contractor workers stumbles and falls 3 meters, hitting their head on a concrete floor below. The other workers shout for help. The supervisor, returning from a break, hears the shouts, as does the project manager who is in the site office. Both arrive at the scene. Unsure of the site first aid arrangements, the supervisor rushes back to their van to fetch a first aid kit. One of the workers calls an ambulance from their mobile phone. You were already on your way to the site when the project manager telephoned you. On arrival, you find the contractor workers are visibly shocked. The supervisor is tending to the injured worker. No one appears to have taken control of the situation. You set up temporary barriers to prevent access to the accident location, remove onlookers and take the remaining contractor workers to the site office to get a coffee. The project manager has already stopped all work at the site. You telephone the CEO to advise them of the accident and that it will require reporting to the HSE. The CEO is concerned about the delays to the refurbishment and tell you to minimise any delay and get the place cleaned up so that work can continue. You explain that the scene needs to be preserved as there will need to be an investigation and that the HSE will be likely to visit the site. Now I'm going to go through how to allocate marks to yourself so you can find out how you would have performed on this question. So just a bit of a reminder of what the question is. It was around health and safety management systems. The question was, it begins with the statement, effective health and safety management requires good leadership. Then it asks you to comment on the health and safety leadership in the scientific research organisation, and then there's a note to say that you should support your answer where applicable using relevant information from the scenario. So with this, when you're marking your work, you're kind of going to have to put a different hat on. So try and be self-critical, but at the same time it's important that you do allocate yourself a mark if you have written something that is worthy of a mark. So it's a bit of a balance between being too hard on yourself and being fair on yourself. Let's start with no commitment from the directors. So if you've written, or if your answer includes a statement along the lines of that there is no commitment from the directors, go ahead and allocate yourself a mark for that. But if you've also said that the directors see health and safety as a necessary inconvenience, you can give yourself an additional mark, because that is evidence of that first statement about the directors not being committed to health and safety. That's true. And then by saying that the directors see health and safety as a necessary inconvenience, which is from the scenario, that kind of provides evidence for that point of the directors not being committed. So that's a possible 2 marks there. If you've only said that the directors aren't committed to health and safety, and then that's all you've said, you haven't really provided any evidence of that, then you can only give yourself 1 mark, but no additional marks. In the same vein, if you've mentioned something about the fact that the directors are more interested in research than they are in health and safety, give yourself another mark. If you've put something along the lines of the directors have decided to assign health and safety responsibility to you as the laboratory manager, then again give yourself an additional mark. If you've put words to the effect that the directors don't seem to understand the organisation's health and safety risks, that's another mark. And there's another mark for pointing out that the directors specifically don't understand the risks associated with desk-based work. That's the bulk of what the scientists were doing, is desk-based work, and because it's desk-based work, they didn't really see it as a problem, so they don't understand specifically the risks associated with desk-based work. If you've put a sentence around that, if you've mentioned that, give yourself another mark. Also, the directors didn't want to do risk assessments. They didn't want to get involved in them. So if you've mentioned that as another example of how the directors are not committed to health and safety, that's another mark. Plus the fact that, and again this is another mark, the directors don't see health and safety as their responsibility. It seems that they're very keen to allocate responsibility to you and not get involved in the risk assessment. So it's clear that it's clear that the directors don't really see health and safety as their problem, their responsibility. So if you've mentioned something that covers that, then give yourself another mark. So that's a mark for saying that for pointing out that the directors are not committed to health and safety. But there's potentially then an additional 7 marks for all of these examples and evidence from the scenario that backs up that assertion that the directors are not committed to health and safety. So it's probably unlikely, but it's possible that you could already have scored 8 points by now, and this is a 10-point question. But there's lots of points still to come. So the next thing you can give yourself a point for is if you've mentioned in your answer that the directors don't seem to be aware of their legal responsibilities. And then you can give yourself an additional mark by specifying that they don't seem to be aware of the CDM regulations or their responsibilities as a client under those CDM regulations. So that's 1 mark for pointing out that they're not aware of their legal responsibilities, but additional marks are available for being specific about the CDM regs. Give yourself a mark if you've mentioned something around the fact that the CEO wants the contracting organisation, the contractor, to sort of take health and safety responsibility. They want to kind of sort of shunt their responsibilities over onto the contractor. And then give yourself another mark for pointing out that the CEO doesn't seem to understand the requirements for contractor selection because they've just given it to their friend. Another thing that the CEO doesn't seem to grasp is the fact that there is a requirement to report this incident that has happened in the scenario under the RIDDOR regulations. So give yourself a mark if you've mentioned the CEO's lack of understanding around the RIDDOR regulations. Give yourself a mark if you've pointed out the fact that the CEO has appointed you without any relevant qualifications, because in the scenario it mentions that you're in the process of studying for your NEBOSH diploma, but there's quite a lot about the work that you don't understand and that you need input for. But the directors have gone ahead and appointed you anyway, while it would appear that you're not quite yet competent to take on that role. And still on the subject of training, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of training that is in place. So there's a mark for pointing out there's inadequate training and the directors should put good training systems in place. And here you can go ahead and give yourself a mark for pointing out any relevant example from the scenario where there is a lack of training. So there's a point for pointing out the lack of training generally and the fact that it's the director's responsibility to ensure that training is in place, and another mark for any relevant example where there's a lack of training in the scenario. And then finally, give yourself a mark for pointing out that the apparent lack of commitment from the directors around health and safety is setting a very poor example to the rest of the workforce. So there I've gone through around sort of almost 20 or thereabouts points where you can go ahead and give yourself marks. This is a 10-point question, so by no means do you have to have hit every single thing that I've said. You don't even have to hit 10 points in order for you to do well. I mean, for this type of question, I would say if you're doing anything sort of above 7 out of 10, you're doing pretty well. Because it's a 10-point question, we can extrapolate out to what you would score out of 100. I know it's a rough way of doing it, but if you've scored 5 out of 10, that's half marks. And you need sort of 45 points out of 100 in order to get a pass in the exam. So I would say
it really depends where you are in your studying. If you've only just started or haven't even enrolled onto a course yet, you're just sort of doing this to find out how you would get on with an NEBOSH exam question, and you haven't done any studying and you've still scored sort of over half marks, I mean, that would be fantastic. If you're quite a ways into your studying, you need to be looking at half marks as the absolute bare minimum. So if you're quite a way into it and you're still only scoring half marks, that wouldn't be so great. So it's up to you really to judge yourself in terms of your performance on this question, in terms of and in the context of where you are along with your studying, if that makes sense. I hope that's been helpful in terms of finding out a little bit more about what's involved in the NEBOSH open book exam before you go ahead and commit to it. Any questions or comments that you want to make, please go ahead and do so in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.